What's cracking like on Rhetorical Thoughts? Eddie back at it again with another rhetorical thought, and this time we're going to be taking a dive into historical figure on YouTube. Some of you may know, some of you may know some of the story, some of you only may know part of the story. But either way, we're going to be talking about a man by the name of Ray William Johnson. So in all honesty, not that large of an argument needs to be made to essentially put Ray's face on the proverbial YouTube Mount Rushmore for the many accomplishments he achieved on YouTube. Now these days a lot of people sort of know him as either a meme, or maybe some people know him for hypocritically claiming a video by the human sack of potatoes, aka Hoover. His accomplishments on YouTube shouldn't be ignored. So long before Ethan and Neela were fighting and winning groundmark cases when it comes to things like fair use, Ray was also fighting and winning some and losing some cases when it came to fair use, and seemingly at the time stood alongside fellow creators. While that may later have been revealed to all have been for selfish motivations, at the time he seemed like he stood with creators. Along with this, Ray was also for some period of time the #1 subscribed channel on YouTube, once again as many people may know, overtaking the channel Nigga Higga. Can I say that? Overtaking Nigga Higga on June 25th of 2011, and then eventually being overtaken by Smosh in January 12th, 2013. Ray was the reigning #1 channel on YouTube. In his reign as the #1 channel on YouTube, Ray was the first YouTuber to reach the milestones of 2, 3, 4, and 5 million subscribers, along with hosting the largest music channel on the platform at the same time. So it's not much of an argument, once again, would need to be made that at this time he was the king of not just YouTube but the internet. He was also noted to be one of the first YouTubers to gain a net worth of over $1 million, easily making him the king of the internet in this period of time. Along with these accomplishments, Ray was also one of the first YouTubers and first large YouTubers to take a public stance against MCNs or multi-channel networks. Now, they had a much greater role back in the day in securing funding or ad revenue for creators. Problem was, these were pretty much all greedy as fuck, and they tried to run their particular cash cow in Ray a little bit too hard, and when they attempted to secure a majority share in his flagship show Equals 3, Ray decided to part ways with them, and in that losing funding to his show Equals 3 and his other projects at the time. Once again, there was a notable dip in quality, but either way, it was still Ray's particular style of comedy, which is just bro humor, childish jokes with the pseudo-intellectualism, all wrapped up and presented in a very smug fashion, which is perfect for capturing a 9 to 13-year-old audience, which is then supplemented by immature 20-year-olds. Now, I could sit here and mock and break down the jokes in his content that he was making at the time, but at the end of the day, it was entertaining to some, and that'll always be a subjective thing. While it's not my cup of tea now, I'm not ashamed to admit that once upon a time, it was my cup of tea. I used to log on with millions of other people on a regular basis and watch mostly Equals 3 for me. And look, it's easy to look back and laugh at him posing himself as a PG Tosh.0 or perhaps a Sesame Street Asheroth in his music ventures, but that's who he was. And while I think that might have contributed to his downfall eventually, I'll touch on that towards the end. That's who he was. So originally I want to talk about his new career as a Facebook comedian or Instagram comedian and sort of rip apart his attempts at social commentary. But as I began researching him, and after watching an insane amount of his podcast and skits, my original concept of this video has changed and warped as time progressed. And rather than focusing on his particular attempt at social commentary, I would like to welcome you to the mind of Ray William Johnson.
Where's my black baby?
Smart ass, done graduated. A lifetime of school and we're glad you made it.
Damn, nigga. Girl, you left me. Oh no, we broke up and it's been a while since we last spoke, but I need another chance. Can you give me that?
Parkinson's, or whatever the dog equivalent of it is. Parkinson's? Yeah?
Because every now and then you feel the need to just snatch up a baby.
So the first step I think we should take is look at Ray's podcast. So Ray has been doing a weekly podcast alongside his co-host, Epic Lloyd, for a little over a year or around a year now. Now, Epic Lloyd is one of the co-creators of epic rap battles of history. So on paper, this already sounds like it could be a really, really good podcast. Perhaps this is my particular spin on it, but I think about it like this. You have two people from some of the most iconic YouTube channels in history coming together on a weekly podcast just to talk shop, hopefully to talk shop and see what's going on. Both bringing such unique perspectives and a depth of knowledge that no one, if not very few, would be able to even have access to. Experiences and understandings of social media that no one has ever seen. They know what's going under the hood in so many different ways. Unfortunately, it's not that. It's more of a formulaic podcast, and look, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I just think that this is, in some ways, a very missed opportunity. I say it's a missed opportunity because I think, for myself, once again, this is me painting this from my perspective. I don't religiously watch the H3 podcast, but I make a particular note to watch it when they have YouTubers on, because I really enjoy seeing them talk shop, and I really enjoy see them talk about the growth of channels and all these things like that. It's just, there's something enjoyable about seeing two YouTubers just talking about something that goes on under the hood. And once again, the sad part is they hardly ever touch on like YouTube or social media related news. It's just sort of just very, very general, very surface level stuff that they cover. Now, their podcast, I think, as it stands right now, it's gone through several different chops and changes when it comes to the segments, but the current main 4 segments as it stands right now, one, more or less an intro where they just sort of catch up with each other about what's going on in their week and what's going on in their week. Nothing too fancy, nothing going on, nothing too bad there. Following this, they move into the headlines. Now, one of the things that Lloyd mentions in one of the podcasts I listen to is that he's making a point to disconnect himself from social media and like a lot of cable news in general, because he feels like it was getting too negative. So this sort of makes it now the role of informant to Ray. So where it's Ray sort of updating Lloyd on what's going on in the world around, and allows him to put his particular lefty slant on it. Now, just one quick point: there's nothing wrong with left or right-wing politics, in my opinion. I just want this to be noted for the future reference that Ray has a very strong left slant. I think in one episode he defended the people who protested outside of Tucker Carlson's house and bashed the door, and he seems to still be very, very firm on the idea, that Trump is going to get impeached for obstruction of justice and all these different things like that. And look, I'm an Australian, I don't entirely have my grasp on that, but he very much speaks talking points from the left side of politics. Nothing wrong with that. So my main gripe with this segment is, once again, there's going to be a recurring thought through this whole, when I discuss their podcast, is that it's a missed opportunity. I don't want to tell them how to do their job, but I think to themselves, if they just included a story each week, or just more often where they discuss social media goings-on and all that. Now, I listened to their in-map research, I listened to their 6 or 7 most recent podcasts, and then I started selecting particular episodes that had seemingly YouTube or social media related topics in the titles, and they never really went into them. The only one I found was where they discussed the YouTuber who had their account deleted for posting the Red Dead Redemption footage of him beating up the feminists in-game. And the only real in-depth analysis of this is where Lloyd sort of plays devil's advocate to some of the points that Ray was bringing up, where he says, oh look, the main reason for YouTube sort of deleting content like this is because they want to show to advertisers that we stand against this problematic content, so they seem more advertiser friendly on the surface. It was more, to him, he sort of posed it as being more of a political move rather than an actual strong opinion.
Let's be very clear. YouTube didn't do this because of morals. YouTube did this because of money. And that is...
Go on.
Advertisers don't want to advertise on that type of content, and advertisers want an easy way to advertise on YouTube. They want to be able to put their ads on a broad spectrum of videos very easily. And YouTube wants to make it easy that way. That's what YouTube is going to be. It's like ABC and NBC. It's like the mainstream video on demand service.
So why not demonetize his videos or his channel? Why delete him?
Because it's easier. It's easier just to sort of systematically start removing that stuff from your site so you can monetize more and you can advertise more broadly and with less clicks and less filters.
Right.
It's money driven.
Next, they move on to a segment called Stoner Thoughts, which in my opinion has one of the most disgusting intros, and for whatever reason they think it's great to play it before every single Stoner Thought. And if you don't believe me, imagine hearing this Stoner Thoughts 10 or 12 times in an episode. So Stoner Thoughts, I think is also kind of cute, where it's kind of like a boiled down version of what Equals 3 was, which is Ray and Lloyd making little quips and jokes about these fan submitted or things that they found, tweets, thoughts, ideas that are sort of designed to make you say, whoa. More or less the idea, shower thoughts, that sort of hashtag shower thoughts sort of thing. I think it's kind of funny that Ray's still sort of jockeying off other people's content, but that's a little thing for something else, you know what I'm saying? What did I just say? And finally, they have a section where it's just an advice section, whereby fans will send in recordings to them of their problems. Now, once again, initially, my main gripe with this was, this could be you guys leading with your strengths, being like, you've got social media, you've got great social media experience and great YouTube experience and stuff. You could be providing people advice when it comes to that. Now, maybe their audience doesn't want it. That's fine, because it's really just a general advice thing. What actually ends up happening is this segment gets way, way out of hand. It goes from really simple relationship advice, where I think, look, anyone who's been in a relationship through a breakup really has, good opinion, a valid opinion to provide on that when it comes to advice. To them talking to a 16-year-old dad who wants to start dating again, to which Ray's advice is, wait 2 years and then hop on Tinder. To a guy who's never met his mum his entire life and has been rationalizing whether he wants to meet up with her, but she's currently serving 2 life sentences in prison. To which Lloyd sort of provides, which I think is a very middle ground and fair piece of advice. He goes, you should just do it so that you can clear up those feelings. If you hate it, you shouldn't have done it. If you don't do it, you'll always be questioning yourself. Whereby Ray says, and I'm not exaggerating, he says, you probably shouldn't go see her, but if you do, be careful, because she might attempt to manipulate you to break the law for her while she's in prison. Like, his mum's not the fucking Joker or Hannibal Lecter, but can't get too passionate yet. The advice goes from that, and then it eventually arrives at what I consider the piece de la resistance. I don't know if that suits you. Fuck it. Of advice that they give, whereby you have this guy calling in who's in what I think is a really fucking terrible situation. So the story goes, he lives at home with his grandmother, brother, and mother. Now, his younger brother's been getting into gangs and all this stuff like that, but he's been carrying drugs and weapons through the family house and always carrying a gun on him. So the older brother does what any respecting older brother would do in that situation, and he confronts his younger brother and says, you need to either grow up or take your shit elsewhere. The situation then escalates between him and his younger brother, and they get into a physical altercation. Cops are called, and now this older brother has an assault charge on him, apparently. So this guy's in a situation that even someone like Dr. Phil would struggle through. This is like something that like Jerry Springer and Maury Povich would both reject, because they're like, fuck, this is some real heavy shit. Bring on old mate Ray William Johnson to come save the day. Whereby, I'm not exaggerating again, his advice is literally, so your younger brother carries a gun on him at all times, here's what you do. You wait for him to leave the house one day and you call the cops on him.
Just, like, stay out of trouble. Stay out of it if you can. Let the police handle it.
Yeah.
If you need to. And if that guy's walking around with a gun, look, easiest thing. He's walking around your house with a gun, right? And he's got a gun. Obviously, I wouldn't say, hey, go confront him and take away his gun. You're gonna get in trouble. You're gonna get hurt. Wait till he leaves. Oh, great. What car did he leave in? A red Honda? Cool. Then you call the police and you go, hey, I just saw this red Honda leaving this address with my neighbor's house.
Yeah.
And I swear to God, the guy had a gun. The police will find that car and pull him over, and they'll take him to jail. Which I know that like sucks, but if you're really worried about your safety and your family's safety, then that's where little brother needs to be.
Yes.
I wouldn't put up with that shit. You got a gun get the fuck out of my house, and if I can't make you get out, the police will.
So personally, look, the recurring theme of me discussing this podcast is that it's a missed opportunity. I can't tell them what to do. If their audience doesn't want it, or they don't want to give it to them, it's their prerogative. It's their podcast. They can do what they want at the end of the day. It's their right. I'm upset that they're not leading with their strengths or whatever, but up to them. To me, this podcast merely was a vessel for me trying to gain an insight into the way that Ray William Johnson thinks in 2019. And now I'd like to provide you the final insight that I gained from this podcast after listening to hours upon hours of Ray William Johnson talking. So in the aforementioned episode where they were discussing Red Dead Redemption, Lloyd mentions the way people respond to him sometimes on Twitter, where he says, he'll post something about, how he's going to do a charity event for cancer, and someone's like, hey man, just do more rap battles. And then Ray firmly steps forward and says, they just like to complain. But then Lloyd sort of retorts and corrects his statement by saying he sort of meant that comment in jest, and he realizes that it's just people who appreciate what they do and they just want them to do what they love. Really, if anything, those people who are complaining are just providing compliments. Ray stays firm to his point and says they're just complaining.
It's
Well,
like someone posts something about like a charity for children with cancer, and people are like, just make more rap battles. Oh, God.
God.
What the hell, man?
What are you doing? Just make more rap
Yeah,
battles.
where's equals 3?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's just people wanting, that's just people complaining.
Yeah, and it's
And I see
tough to
that different
complain.
from, like, being pro-cancer and saying really evil and awful things or whatever.
Yeah.
I think that's just general complaining.
Yeah. And it's tough to be, I say that jestingly, and it's tough to like really get annoyed because it's just somebody saying, hey, I love your stuff and I want more of it.
Right. And I don't know what to do other than complain.
So you see, Ray sticking to his guns shows us that he thinks that people who miss the content he used to do, or who want him to do more of the stuff, like, man, I miss Equals 3, I loved you from Equals 3, I loved you when you were doing your favorite Martian. You just like to complain. That's all it is. You're not a fan, you don't appreciate him, you don't appreciate what he's done, you're just a complainer. And that about does it for the podcast.